What if the ancient world wasn't as primitive as we think? What if, thousands of years ago, humans built things that we still struggle to explain today? It's hard to believe, isn't it? A fortress atop a sheer cliff, perfectly aligned structures, oriented to follow the sun. Huge stones so precisely cut, they look like they were made by machines. These places are real. You can visit them, you can touch them. However, they still don't quite make sense, and it's hard to believe they were accomplished by the hands and techniques of people of that era. So the question is, are we underestimating the past or missing something far bigger? In the heart of Sri Lanka, rising straight out of the jungle like something unreal, stands a massive column of rock. It's called Sigiriya, and at first glance it doesn't even look climbable, let alone livable. But somehow, over 500 years ago, people didn't just climb it, they built a palace on top of it. Think about that for a second. This isn't a gentle hill or a wide plateau. This is a near vertical rock, almost 200 meters high, with sheer sides that offer almost no natural footholds. And yet, in the 5th century, during the reign of King Kashyapa, this impossible place became the center of a royal kingdom. As you approach Sigiriya, the first thing you notice is the symmetry. Water gardens spread out at the base, perfectly aligned pools, channels, and pathways. Even today, during the rainy season, some of these fountains still work. That means the builders understood hydraulic engineering at a level that feels surprisingly modern. Then the climb begins. Step by step, you move upward, closer to the rock face. Halfway up, something unexpected appears. 2 enormous lion paws carved directly into the stone. This was once the Lion Gate, the entrance to the palace above. The full structure likely included a massive lion figure, with its mouth forming the doorway. Imagine walking through that. Entering a fortress not just protected by height, but by symbolism, power, dominance, intimidation. As you continue climbing, the path narrows. At one point, you walk along a polished wall so smooth it was once called the mirror wall. Centuries ago, it was so reflective that the king could see himself as he passed. And above that, hidden in a sheltered section of the rock, are ancient frescoes. Paintings of women, graceful, detailed, vibrant, even after all this time. Their purpose is still debated. Were they royal attendants, celestial beings? No one knows for sure. And then you reach the top. Suddenly, the climb opens into a flat summit, and up here, on this isolated wind-swept platform, are the ruins of a palace. Foundations of buildings, pools carved into stone, terraces overlooking endless jungle. This wasn't just a lookout point. This was a fully functioning royal complex, which raises a simple but powerful question. How did people in the 5th century transport materials all the way up here? How did they plan and construct something so complex in a place so difficult to access? And perhaps most importantly, why choose this location at all? One theory is fear. King Kashyapa took the throne in a violent way, and he may have built Sigiriya as a fortress to protect himself from attack. If that's true, it worked. Because standing at the top, looking out across the vast landscape, you realize something immediately. No army could approach without being seen. No enemy could climb without being exposed. This wasn't just architecture, it was strategy. But beyond the military advantage, there's something else, something harder to explain. A sense of ambition that feels almost excessive, because building on the ground would have been easier, safer, faster. But they didn't choose easy. They chose extraordinary. And maybe that's what makes Sigiriya so fascinating. It's not just the height, not just the engineering, it's the mindset behind it. A decision to take something impossible and make it real. High in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia, at nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, there's a place where the air feels thinner and the past feels heavier. It's called Tiwanaku. At first glance, it looks like a field of ruins, broken walls, scattered stones, fragments of something long gone. But the longer you look, the stranger it becomes. Because the stones here don't look ancient in the way you'd expect. They don't look rough. They don't look worn down by time. They look engineered. Massive blocks of andesite and sandstone, cut with an accuracy that feels almost unnatural. Edges that meet at perfect right angles. Surfaces so flat and smooth they reflect light. Joints so tight you can't even slide a blade between them. And then there are the details. Small, precise holes drilled into the stone, uniform in size and depth. Clean, geometric cuts that repeat across different structures. H-shaped blocks that fit together like pieces of a puzzle. It doesn't feel random, it feels intentional, systematic. Which raises a question that has puzzled researchers for decades. How did they do this? Because according to what we know, the Tiwanaku civilization did not have iron or steel tools. They worked with stone tools, copper and bronze, materials that on paper shouldn't be capable of producing this level of precision, and yet here it is, right in front of us. One of the most famous structures here is the Gateway of the Sun, a single massive stone carved into a monumental arch. At the top, there's a complex pattern of figures. Some believe it represents a calendar, others think it's symbolic or religious. But what stands out isn't just the carving, it's the balance, the symmetry, the way everything aligns with such care that it feels more like design than decoration. And Tiwanaku isn't just about individual stones. It was once a thriving city, home to thousands of people with advanced agriculture, irrigation systems, and social organization. They built raised fields to control flooding. They engineered canals to manage water. They created an entire system to survive and thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. So this wasn't a primitive society. This was a civilization that understood its environment and mastered it. And yet there are still gaps. We don't fully understand how they transported these massive stones, some weighing over 100 tons, across long distances without wheels or large draft animals. We don't fully understand how they achieved such consistent precision across different structures. And perhaps most intriguingly, we don't fully understand why the site was eventually abandoned. Standing in Tiwanaku today, there's a strange contrast. On one hand, it feels ancient, weathered, silent, exposed to centuries of wind and sun. But on the other hand, some parts feel almost modern, like you're looking at something that doesn't quite belong to its time. And maybe that's why Tiwanaku is so captivating, because it challenges a quiet assumption we all carry, that progress is linear, that the past is always less advanced than the present. But places like this suggest something different, that knowledge can be lost, that skills can disappear, that entire ways of understanding the world can rise and then vanish, leaving behind only fragments that we're still trying to piece together. And maybe the most unsettling part is this, not that Tiwanaku is impossible, but that we still don't fully understand what was once possible. Hidden deep within the deserts of Jordan, there is a city you don't see all at once. You have to walk to it, through a narrow canyon called the Sik, walls of rock rising high on both sides, blocking out the sky, guiding you forward. It feels quiet, isolated, almost like the world is closing in. And then, without warning, the canyon opens. And there it is, Petra. A massive facade carved directly into the rock, towering, detailed, almost impossibly precise. Not built with blocks, not assembled piece by piece, carved from a single cliff. Columns, statues, decorative elements, all emerging from solid stone as if they were always there, just waiting to be revealed. And that's just the beginning. Because Petra isn't just one structure, it's an entire city, hidden in the rock. Temples, tombs, stairways, entire walls transformed into architecture. Everywhere you look, there are signs of deliberate design, symmetry, proportion, balance. And here's what makes it even more incredible. Most of these structures were carved from the top down. Think about that. The builders had to start at the top of a cliff and work their way downward. One mistake, just one, and the entire facade could be ruined. There was no undo button, no second chance. So the question becomes, how did they plan something like this? How did they visualize the final structure before a single cut was made? Because once you begin carving into solid rock, you're committed. And yet, across Petra, we see consistency. We see precision, we see confidence, which tells us something important. These weren't experiments. These were the results of a system, a knowledge of stone, of geometry, of structure, refined over time. But Petra isn't just about what you see on the surface. It's also about what you don't notice at first. Water. Because Petra sits in a desert, an environment where survival depends on controlling one thing: water. And somehow, the people who built this city mastered it. They created channels carved into rock walls. They built dams and reservoirs. They designed systems to capture and store rainwater, protecting the city from both drought and flash floods. This wasn't just art. This was engineering. Advanced, practical, life-sustaining engineering, which makes Petra even more remarkable. Because it wasn't just a place of beauty. It was a place of survival. A thriving city in the middle of harsh terrain, connected to trade routes, filled with life, movement, and culture. And then, it faded. Over time, Petra was abandoned, slowly forgotten by the outside world, until it was rediscovered in the 19th century. Imagine that moment, walking through the Sikh just like we do today, and suddenly seeing a lost city emerge from stone, a place that had been hidden, in plain sight. And even now, standing in Petra, there's a feeling you can't quite shake, because what you're looking at doesn't feel temporary. It doesn't feel fragile. It feels permanent. As if the builders weren't just creating structures, they were carving their presence into the earth itself. And maybe that's the most powerful part of Petra. Not just that it exists, but that it was designed to endure, to outlast time, to remain long after the people who built it were gone. In the quiet countryside of Ireland, there's a place that doesn't look extraordinary at first. Just a large, grass-covered mound, sitting gently in the landscape. No towering walls, no dramatic height, nothing that immediately demands attention. But beneath that simple surface is something far more remarkable. This is Newgrange, and it's older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, built over 5,000 years ago, which already makes it impressive. But what truly sets Newgrange apart is not what it looks like, it's what it does. At the front of the mound, there's a narrow entrance, a small opening marked by a large stone carved with spirals and symbols. From there, a tight passage leads inward, about 20 meters long, dark, enclosed, silent. At the end of that passage is a central chamber, a space that has remained hidden from the outside world for thousands of years. And for most of the year, nothing happens. It stays in darkness, still, quiet, unchanging. But once a year, on the morning of the winter solstice, something incredible happens. As the sun rises on the horizon, a thin beam of light enters the entrance. It passes through a specially designed opening above the doorway, known as the roof box. And then, slowly, deliberately, that light travels down the narrow passage, all the way to the center of the chamber, illuminating it completely. For a few brief minutes, a space that has been in darkness for an entire year fills with light. And then, it fades. Gone again for another year. Now think about what that means. This wasn't an accident. The alignment is too precise. The timing is too exact. The builders of Newgrange understood the movement of the sun with incredible accuracy. They knew exactly where the sun would rise on the shortest day of the year, and they designed an entire structure around that single moment. But here's the question that makes it even more fascinating. Why? Why go through the effort of building such a complex monument just to capture a few minutes of sunlight once a year? Some believe it was symbolic, a celebration of rebirth, light returning after the longest night, a marker of time helping ancient people track the seasons. Others think it had a spiritual meaning, a connection between the living and the dead, a way to guide something or someone through the darkness. Because Newgrange is also a burial site, human remains were found inside the chamber, which suggests that this wasn't just a calendar. It was something more, a place where time, light, and death all come together. And then there are the carvings, spirals etched into stone, repeating patterns, symbols that no one fully understands. Were they decorative, mathematical, a form of communication? We don't know. And maybe that's part of the mystery. Because Newgrange doesn't overwhelm you with size or power. It does something subtler. It reveals its brilliance, slowly, quietly, through alignment, through timing, through patience. It's a reminder that ancient people weren't just building to survive. They were building to understand the world around them, to measure it, to connect with it, to find meaning in it. And perhaps that's what makes Newgrange so extraordinary. Not that it's massive, but that it's precise, so precise that even after 5,000 years, the sun still finds its way inside, exactly as intended. In the quiet countryside of Brittany in northwestern France, there's a landscape that doesn't feel natural, even though it is. At first, it looks simple, just fields, grass, open sky, and then you start to notice them. Stones, standing upright, one after another, then more and more, until you realize they don't stop. This is Carnac, and what you're looking at isn't just a group of ancient stones. It's one of the largest and most mysterious megalithic sites in the world. Over 3,000 stones arranged in long, parallel lines, stretching for kilometers across the land. Not scattered, not random, aligned. Carefully, consistently, intentionally. And that's where the mystery begins, because these stones were placed here over 4,000 years ago. Long before written history in this region. Long before we have any clear record of who built them, or why. Each stone weighs several tons. Some stand taller than a person, and yet they were transported, positioned, and aligned with surprising precision. But here's the part that feels almost unsettling. No one agrees on their purpose. Some believe the stones were used for astronomy, that the alignments track the movement of the sun or the moon across the sky. Others think they had a ritual function, a sacred landscape where ceremonies were performed, perhaps tied to seasons, life, or death. And then there are theories that suggest something even more abstract. That Carnac wasn't meant to be used in a practical sense at all, but experienced. A space designed to be walked through, to be felt. Because when you stand among these stones, something changes. The scale becomes overwhelming. Rows stretching into the distance, fading into the horizon. You lose track of where it begins and where it ends. And suddenly, it's not just about individual stones anymore. It's about the pattern, the repetition, the intention behind placing thousands of objects in near-perfect order. And here's what makes that so difficult to explain. This level of organization requires planning, coordination, a shared understanding across a large group of people. But we don't have written records, we don't have clear tools, we don't even have a definitive cultural explanation. All we have is the result. A silent grid of stone left behind. And over time, nature has slowly tried to reclaim it. Grass grows between the rows, wind moves across the fields, the stones remain, unmoved, unanswered. Which raises a deeper question. What kind of society commits to something like this? To moving thousands of massive stones, not for shelter, not for defense, but for alignment? Because building one monument is impressive. Building thousands in a coordinated system is something else entirely. It suggests belief, purpose. A reason strong enough to organize people across generations, and yet, that reason is gone, lost. All that remains is the pattern. And maybe that's why Carnac feels so different from other ancient sites. It doesn't reveal itself easily. It doesn't give you a clear story. Instead, it leaves you with a feeling, a sense that you're standing inside something meaningful, even if you don't understand what that meaning is. And perhaps that's the point. Because not every structure was built to explain itself. Some were built to be remembered, even if the memory is incomplete. Deep in central India, hidden within a curved cliff that wraps around a quiet river valley, there's a place where stone turns into story. At first, you don't see much, just a rocky hillside carved with a series of dark openings, simple, repetitive, almost unremarkable. But step inside one of those openings, and everything changes. This is Ajanta, a collection of caves carved directly into solid rock, over 2,000 years ago. But these aren't just caves, they are temples, monasteries, entire living spaces, created from nothing but stone. And they weren't built outward, they were carved inward. Every column, every wall, every ceiling, removed, shaped, refined by hand. Which means the builders had to imagine the final structure before they even began. Because once you start carving into rock, there's no going back. And yet, what they created isn't just structural, it's artistic. Because inside these caves, covering walls and ceilings, are paintings. Detailed, expressive, alive, scenes of daily life, stories from Buddhist teachings, faces filled with emotion, calm, sorrow, joy. And here's what makes it even more astonishing. Most of this work was done in near darkness. No electricity, No modern lighting, only flickering oil lamps casting unstable shadows across the walls. Imagine painting a face under that light, trying to capture symmetry, proportion, detail. And yet the results are incredibly precise. The lines are confident. The colors, though faded, still carry depth. The compositions feel intentional, balanced, complete. This wasn't trial and error, this was mastery. And it raises a powerful question. How did they achieve this level of artistic control in such conditions? Because it's not just the paintings. The architecture itself is just as impressive. In some caves, you'll find massive halls with rows of perfectly carved columns, ceilings shaped with symmetry and rhythm. Shrines placed at exact focal points, all of it carved from a single piece of rock. No added materials, no separate blocks, just subtraction, removing everything that wasn't part of the final design. And that requires something more than skill. It requires vision, the ability to see something that isn't there yet. But Ajanta isn't just about technique, it's about purpose. These caves were used by Buddhist monks, places for meditation, study, and reflection, which means the environment itself was part of the experience. The darkness, the silence, the cool air inside the stone. Everything designed to pull you inward, to quiet the outside world, to focus the mind. And maybe that's why the art feels different here. It's not loud, it doesn't demand attention, it draws you in, slowly. You don't just look at it, you sit with it. And over time, something becomes clear. This wasn't created for display, it wasn't meant to impress outsiders. It was created for those who were already inside, for those willing to step into the dark and stay there long enough to see. And then for centuries, Ajanta was forgotten. Hidden by jungle, covered by time, until it was rediscovered by accident in the 19th century, which means everything we see today survived in silence, waiting. And maybe that's what makes Ajanta so powerful. Not just that it exists, but that it endured, that in complete darkness without recognition, without preservation, it remained. A reminder that even in the absence of light, human creativity doesn't disappear. It adapts, it persists, and sometimes it creates its most extraordinary work in the dark. In the heart of Myanmar, where the land stretches flat and open under an endless sky, there's a place where the horizon doesn't look natural. Because instead of trees or buildings, you see temples, hundreds of them. No, thousands. This is Bagan. And at its peak between the 9th and 13th centuries, this wasn't just a city, it was a skyline. A vast living landscape filled with over 10,000 temples, pagodas, and monasteries rising from the earth like a forest made of stone and brick. Today, around 2,000 still remain, scattered across the plains, silent, weathered, but still standing. And when you see them all together, something feels different. Because this isn't a single monument. It's a system, a vision repeated over and over again, across miles of land. Each structure slightly different, some tall and narrow, reaching upward, others wide and grounded, with layered terraces, some richly decorated, others almost minimal. But all of them connected by a common purpose: devotion. Bagan was once the spiritual heart of a powerful kingdom, and building temples wasn't just an act of faith, it was an expression of identity. Kings built them, nobles built them, even ordinary people contributed. Each structure, a statement, a belief made visible. But here's what makes Bagan so difficult to fully grasp: the scale. Because building one temple is a challenge, building thousands over centuries requires something else entirely: planning, resources, labor, continuity. It means that generation after generation, people kept building, adding to the landscape, expanding it, until the entire horizon was transformed. And yet, despite this massive effort, Bagan didn't last forever. Invasions, environmental changes, shifts in power. Over time, the city declined. The temples remained, left behind as the people moved on. And slowly, nature began to take over. Dust settled, vegetation grew, structures weakened, but they didn't disappear. They endured. And today, when you stand in Bagan, especially at sunrise or sunset, the experience feels almost unreal. Hot air balloons drift across the sky, soft light washes over the temples, shadows stretch across the ground, and for a moment it feels like time has paused, like you're looking at a memory rather than a place. And maybe that's what makes Bagan so powerful, because it doesn't confront you with a single mystery. It surrounds you with one. Why build so much? Why dedicate so many resources to structures that weren't meant to defend or to house large populations? Why create a landscape where spirituality is not contained in one place, but spread everywhere? The answer isn't simple, but it points to something important. That for the people of Bagan, belief wasn't separate from daily life. It shaped the environment. It defined the skyline. It turned the ordinary land into something sacred. And perhaps that's why, even in silence, even in ruin, Bagan still feels alive. Not because of what it is now, but because of what it once was. A city where the horizon itself was built by human intention. Deep in the rainforests of Guatemala, there's a place where the jungle doesn't just surround history, it hides it. For centuries, Tikal was invisible, swallowed by thick vegetation, covered by layers of time, its temples buried beneath trees, its plazas lost beneath roots and soil. And yet, it was always there, a city, not a small settlement, not a forgotten outpost, a megacity. At its height, Tikal was home to tens of thousands of people, living, building, trading, and thriving. Right in the middle of dense rainforest. And the first time you see it, it doesn't reveal itself all at once. You walk through the jungle, you hear birds, insects, wind moving through leaves, and then suddenly a structure rises above the trees. A pyramid, steep, massive, silent, like something that doesn't belong in the natural world around it. That's when it hits you. This wasn't just a place where people lived, this was a place they transformed. Because building in a rainforest isn't easy. The ground is unstable, the climate is humid, vegetation grows fast, constantly reclaiming space. And yet the Maya built something extraordinary here. Stone pyramids reaching over 60 meters high, wide plazas designed for gatherings and ceremonies, causeways connecting different parts of the city, all of it planned, organized, intentional, and perhaps most impressively, sustainable. Because here's the real challenge. There are no rivers running through the center of Tikal, no easy water source. So how did they support such a large population? The answer lies beneath your feet. The Maya engineered a complex system of reservoirs, collecting rainwater, storing it, managing it across seasons. They adapted to the environment instead of trying to control it completely. Which means Tikal wasn't just built in the jungle, it was built with it. But beyond the engineering, there's something else. Something you feel when you climb one of the pyramids. As you reach the top, the jungle stretches out in every direction. Endless green, and then rising above it, other temples. Their peaks breaking through the canopy like islands in a sea of trees. It's a skyline, hidden, but still there. And in that moment, you realize something. The jungle didn't destroy Tikal. It preserved it. Because when the city declined, due to environmental stress, political conflict, or shifting trade routes, it was abandoned, and the forest slowly grew back, covering it, protecting it, concealing it, until centuries later, it was rediscovered. Which means everything we see today survived because it was forgotten. And that's a strange idea, that disappearance can sometimes be a form of preservation. But Tikal also challenges another assumption, that ancient cities needed open land, rivers, or easy conditions to thrive. Tikal had none of that. And yet, it became one of the most powerful centers of the Maya world, which tells us something important. Human ingenuity doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It adapts, it finds solutions, even in the most unlikely places. And maybe that's why Tikal feels so powerful. Because it's not just a city in the jungle, it's a reminder that even when nature seems overwhelming, humans can still leave a mark, one so strong that even the jungle itself can't erase it. On the island of Java in Indonesia, there's a structure that doesn't rise like a typical temple. It doesn't point sharply toward the sky. It doesn't dominate the horizon with height alone. Instead, it unfolds, layer by layer, step by step, like a journey carved into stone. This is Borobudur, and from a distance it looks like a massive stone hill, symmetrical, grounded, almost quiet. But as you get closer, the details begin to emerge, terraces stacked one above the other, hundreds of relief panels wrapping around the structure, stupas, bell-shaped monuments dotting the upper levels. And suddenly you realize something important. This isn't just a building, it's a path. Because Borobudur wasn't designed to be viewed from one angle. it was designed to be walked. You start at the base and begin to move clockwise, following a precise route. With every step, you rise higher. And as you move, the walls beside you begin to tell stories. Thousands of carved panels depicting scenes from everyday life, moral lessons, and Buddhist teachings. Each one detailed, each one intentional. But here's the key. You don't see everything at once. You experience it gradually, like turning pages in a book, carved into stone. And as you continue upward, something subtle begins to change. The space opens up, the walls become less crowded, the carvings become simpler, until eventually they disappear altogether. You reach the upper levels, circular terraces, open sky, and around you, rows of stone stupas, each containing a seated Buddha, silent, still, repeating. And at the very top, a single larger stupa. No interior chamber, no elaborate decoration, just form, just presence. And this is where the deeper meaning of Borobudur begins to reveal itself, because the entire structure is designed as a mandala, a symbolic representation of the universe in Buddhist philosophy. The lower levels represent the world of desire, the middle levels represent the world of form, and the upper levels represent the formless. A movement from complexity to simplicity, from noise to silence, from the external to the internal. And what's remarkable is that this philosophical journey is expressed entirely through architecture, through space, through movement, through stone. But there's another layer to the mystery. Borobudur was built in the 8th and 9th centuries, using millions of volcanic stone blocks. And here's the surprising part. No mortar was used. Each stone was cut and placed so precisely that the entire structure holds together through interlocking design. And it has endured earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and centuries of weather. But perhaps even more surprising, it was abandoned, for reasons we still don't fully understand. Over time, it was covered by volcanic ash, overgrown by jungle, hidden, until it was rediscovered centuries later. Which means this entire structure, this massive symbolic journey carved into stone, was lost, and then found again. And maybe that's what makes Borobudur so unique. It doesn't overwhelm you with height or force. It invites you to walk, to observe, to reflect. It doesn't tell you what to think. It gives you space to think. And in a world that often moves fast, builds fast, and forgets quickly, Borobudur offers something different. A reminder that some structures aren't meant to be rushed. They're meant to be experienced, one step at a time. In the rolling highlands of central Turkey, far from modern cities and noise, there's a place where the past feels unusually heavy. Not just old, massive. This is Hattusa, once the capital of the Hittite Empire, one of the great powers of the ancient world. But when you arrive here today, what stands out isn't just the history, it's the scale. Because everything in Hattusa feels oversized. The stones are bigger, the walls are thicker, the gates are taller than they need to be, as if this city wasn't just built for people, but for something larger. As you walk through the ruins, you begin to notice the layout. Terraces carved into hillsides, fortifications wrapping around the landscape, pathways leading through controlled entrances. This wasn't a random settlement. It was planned, defensive, strategic, intentional. And then you reach one of its most iconic features, the Lion Gate. Two massive stone lions flank the entrance, carved directly into the blocks. They don't look decorative. They look watchful, guarding the city even after thousands of years. And that's the feeling Hattusa gives you, that it was built to protect something important, something worth defending at all costs. But here's where things become more intriguing. The walls of Hattusa once stretched for several kilometers, enclosing a vast urban space. And they weren't just high, they were reinforced. Multiple layers, towers, controlled access points. This level of military architecture suggests a deep understanding of defense, of how to manage movement, visibility, and vulnerability. And yet, despite all of this, Hattusa didn't survive. At some point around the end of the Bronze Age, the city was abandoned, burned, left behind, and for centuries it disappeared from memory. The Hittites themselves became almost myth, mentioned in ancient texts but with little physical evidence, until Hattusa was rediscovered, and suddenly an entire empire came back into view. But even now, standing among these ruins, there's a strange tension, because on one hand Hattusa feels grounded, practical, military, logical, but on the other hand, it feels symbolic. Take the gates, for example, the Lion Gate, the King's Gate, the Sphinx Gate. Each one marked by powerful imagery, animals, figures, guardians, not just to impress, but to communicate, to send a message. This city is strong. This city is protected. This city is not to be challenged, and maybe that's why everything feels so large. Because scale itself becomes a language, a way to project power without words. But there's still something we don't fully understand. How a civilization capable of building something this organized, this fortified, this advanced, could simply disappear. Because Hattusa isn't a small ruin. It's a statement, a declaration that once in this quiet landscape, there was a center of power. A place where decisions were made, alliances formed, wars planned. And now, it's silent. The walls remain, the gates still stand, but the voices are gone. And maybe that's what makes Hattusa so haunting. Not just the size, not just the engineering, but the contrast between what it was and what it is now. A city built to last, a city built to defend. A city that once stood at the center of an empire, now reduced to stone, sky, and memory. On a remote island off the northern coast of Scotland, where the wind never really stops and the ocean is always within earshot, there's a place that feels surprisingly familiar. Not because it's grand, not because it's massive, but because it feels lived in. This is Skara Brae. And unlike towering temples or massive fortresses, this isn't a place built to impress. It's a place built to live. Over 5,000 years ago, long before the pyramids of Egypt, people here created a small village, simple homes clustered together, partially built into the ground to protect against the harsh climate. From the outside, they look modest, low, compact, almost hidden. But step inside, and something unexpected happens. You begin to recognize things. A bed, a shelf, a central hearth, furniture, carved entirely from stone, not placed there later, not reconstructed, original. Which means what you're seeing isn't just a ruin, it's a snapshot, a moment of daily life, frozen in time. Because Skara Brae wasn't slowly abandoned over centuries. It was likely left behind relatively quickly, possibly due to changing climate or rising sea levels. And then over time, it was covered by sand, protected, hidden, until a storm in the 19th century revealed it again. And what emerged was something incredibly rare, a prehistoric village, preserved with astonishing detail. You can walk from one house to another through narrow passageways. You can see how each space was organized, where people slept, where they stored their belongings, where they gathered around the fire. And suddenly the past doesn't feel distant anymore. It feels close, personal. Because these weren't kings or elites, these were ordinary people, living their lives, solving everyday problems, building homes that could withstand wind, cold, and isolation, and doing it with the materials they had, stone, earth, and ingenuity. But there's something else that stands out. Consistency. The houses follow a similar design, which suggests shared knowledge. A community that planned together, that understood what worked, and repeated it. And then there's the mystery. Because even though we can see how they lived, we still don't fully know who they were, what language they spoke, what they believed, why they left. The details are there, but the story is incomplete. And maybe that's what makes Skara Brae so powerful, because it doesn't overwhelm you with scale, it connects with you through familiarity. You look at a stone bed and you imagine someone sleeping there. You see a hearth and you picture warmth, conversation, daily routine. It's not abstract, it's human. And in a world where so many ancient sites feel distant or symbolic, Skara Brae feels real. It reminds you that history isn't just about empires or monuments. It's about people. People who lived, adapted, created, and left behind traces of their lives in the most unexpected ways. And somehow, through sand, storm, and time, those traces survived, waiting to be seen again. In the vast deserts of Saudi Arabia, where the landscape feels timeless and untouched, there's a rock that doesn't behave like a rock. At first it looks ordinary, a large sandstone formation rising from the ground, weathered, shaped by wind and time. But then you see it, a perfectly straight line, running right through the middle, splitting the rock into two separate halves, clean, sharp, almost surgical. This is Naslaa Rock. And the moment you stand in front of it, One thought comes naturally. That shouldn't look like that, because rocks don't usually split this way. Not with such precision, not with such balance. The two halves stand upright, each resting on a narrow base, almost like pedestals, as if they were carefully placed there, and the gap between them, so straight, so even, that it almost feels artificial, like it was cut. But here's the mystery. There's no evidence of tools, no marks of carving, no signs of human intervention, which leaves us with explanations that are possible, but not entirely satisfying. Some scientists suggest natural processes, wind erosion over thousands of years, slowly wearing away softer material along a fault line. Others point to tectonic stress, pressure within the earth causing the rock to crack along a natural weakness. There's also the idea of temperature changes, extreme heat during the day, cold at night, expanding and contracting the rock until it fractures. All of these explanations make sense, individually. But when you look at the rock itself, something still feels off. Because nature usually leaves irregular edges, rough surfaces, uneven lines. But here, the split is smooth, consistent, almost too perfect. And then there's the balance. Both halves remain standing, stable, as if the split didn't destroy the structure, but preserved it. And that's what makes Naslaa so fascinating. Not just the cut, but the outcome. Because whatever happened here didn't just break the rock. It created something new, something visually striking, something that challenges our expectations. And maybe that's why it captures so much attention, because it sits right on the edge between natural and unnatural, between what we understand and what we question. You don't need a complex story to feel the mystery here. You just need to see it, to stand in front of something that looks so precise, so deliberate, and realize that you don't fully know how it came to be. And in a world where we're used to having answers, that feeling is rare. Naslaa doesn't overwhelm you with scale. It doesn't stretch across miles or tower into the sky. It does something quieter. It makes you pause, look closer, and ask a simple question. Is this just nature, doing something unexpected? Or is there more to the story that we haven't uncovered yet? Either way, it reminds us of something important. That even the simplest objects, like a single rock in the desert, can still challenge everything we think we understand. So, perhaps these structures don't prove that the past is impossible, but rather that we underestimated it. Because long before modern tools existed, humans shaped the world with precision, vision, and clear purpose. I think that after exploring the 12 wonders, you have gained some understanding of the creativity, diligence, and incredible technology of our ancestors. Even now, we, with advanced equipment, brilliant minds, and the help of relevant departments, are still trying to understand how and why. That means the real mystery isn't just what they built, but how much of their knowledge we've lost.